Straight Life by Art and Lori Pepper. This is episode 52 of Straight Life. Episode 52 begins at the opening of chapter 13, the one entitled Stealing. This is my favorite chapter in the book, partly because it's so dramatic and partly because I think it was the most collaborative. I was fascinated by Art's criminal activity and puzzled by what looked to me like plain stupidity. I knew Art wasn't stupid. So when he told me these terrific tales of self-destruction, I wouldn't let him be. I'd interrupt. I'd quiz him, probe. I'd exhaust and irritate him. And he'd get mad at me, but I'd keep harping, flattering, demanding that he give me more and more. And both of us were learning that he could. And when he was provoked, he had an almost photographic memory for the people and the places and events, a novelist's memory. And when I pressed, he told me honestly just how he'd felt and thought and what he'd done. So in the next few episodes, I read chapter 13. I love it for Art's honesty and for his masterful descriptions of his mad adventures, and because he trusted me and told me all about it. This is Art talking. I've often thought that maybe I was in the wrong thing, being a musician. The people I met, the musicians I met, playing in clubs or at recording sessions, seemed very unreal to me, insincere, two-faced. I never knew where I stood with them, and I never felt at home with them, and the only way I could relax with them was to be loaded. I'm that way to this day. They're gossips, real politicians. They come on, oh, hi, but behind your back they'll rank you, and if they get busted, they'll rat on you. And I found when I'd come out of jail, they were always looking at my eyes and looking at my arms to see if there were any marks, while they were smiling at me and saying, oh, how good it is to have you back. When I'd started using drugs, I ran into a different kind of person. In jail, I found people who had honor. They were real. They said what they thought. If someone bad-rapped you to a friend of yours, he'd say, hey man, don't talk about him like that. The cat's my friend. The dope fiends were warm to me and open with me, I felt. And so, on the way home, as I say, I made the turn. I went to East LA and scored and saw the people, and I had some idea that here were people I could communicate with. I started using, and for a while I was able to do it. I had so much money. Diane had a fur coat. For a while I was able to buy dope and continue living the way I had been. And the heroin was actually better for me than the cocinil. I felt healthier. But that wasn't what I wanted. I had to get really far out and have everything change. And in order to do that, I started using just a ridiculous amount of heroin. And so I put myself in a position where I was no longer able to function, really, where it became obvious to everyone what was happening. I started coming in a little late, nodding out at the sessions. Little by little, people started saying, uh-oh, there he goes. Some people tried to talk to me. Is everything all right? You know, the few who really cared about me. But I wouldn't accept any help. I didn't want any help. They thought this was something that was happening to me, that I had no control over. but I was doing it purposely doing it for some end that I'm not really sure what it was, except that I knew I wasn't happy in this false paradise I had carved out for myself in Studio City. I guess in order to really make things difficult, I burglarized a doctor's office. I didn't have to. In close proximity to where we were living, to put pressure on myself. I couldn't find any money, but I got a whole bunch of dope, millions of pills. Diane was really getting messed up. She had decided to go wherever I went and however I went, and I felt bad because what I was doing to myself I didn't want to do to her. I thought, well, maybe I'll use these pills to get us cleaned up, and then maybe I could figure out some way to keep her from going down the tubes with me. We tried to clean up. We went through an unbelievable scene in this little house we lived in for 4 days, taking hundreds of pills. I remember I fell down over a table at one point and broke a lamp and cut myself. It was a nightmare of falling on the floor looking for pills. Diane had dropped the bottles and they broke. Diane was trying to get out of the house. Right near us was a wash by Ventura Boulevard with a big drain, like a storm drain, and she wanted to go to this wash and fling herself over the bridge. It would have killed her, and she would have done it, but she couldn't get out the door. She couldn't find the door. She never found the door. I swear to God, she could not find the door. On about the 5th day, I came to enough to see that the poor dog was just terrified and starving. I knew I had to take care of the dog. I had a pain in my arm. I looked down at my clothes and they were covered with blood. I wondered if I had killed her, Diane, in my delirium to be rid of her. I panicked and ran into the other room, but there she was, alive, lying on the floor amidst the broken bottles. She had cuts all over her from trying to find pills on the floor. I fed the dog, and I realized I had to have some heroin. I was so sick, I couldn't believe it, and I had no money, no nothing. I left the house and got into the car. The car. I'd let it go. No oil change, and I was using cheap gas. And that day, as I was driving to East LA, I ran into the back of another car at a stop sign. No one was hurt, but it ruined my car. Both front tires were cut. When I finally finished with the cop, I left it where it was and started walking. I was in Lincoln Heights when I had the wreck, at 5 Points, a little area where 5 streets come together. I walked to East LA and found Rachel and Boy. I told them I was deathly ill and I had to have a taste, but I didn't have any money. They saw what awful shape I was in, so they turned me on. I said, I've got to get something for Diane. That's one of the few times people have come through when I really needed dope. Boy said, I'll drive you home. He couldn't believe his eyes when we got into the house. The dog was so frightened she peed all over the floor when we went in, and I felt so guilty for the poor dog. Diane was crawling on the floor. Boy helped me put her in a chair. I fixed her, and it brought her back to life. She looked around and told me that she had been trying for days to find the door, to get out, to throw herself off the bridge. I saw that I couldn't stop like that. I didn't want to stop. I had completely messed up my jobs now, missed a couple, and ruined everything. I was already just about written off by everyone. About 4 months after I made that trip on the freeway, and just after this attempt to clean up, I went down to East LA to score, and I ran into a couple of friends of mine, Frank and Ruben, and they wanted to rob a nightclub in Studio City. Both of them were old-timers, been using a long time, and they were pretty sharp. Frank and I had been friends for a while. I'd scored from him, and he'd helped me out occasionally. Frank made me think of a Mexican Mickey Cohen. He always wore suits, and he had a nice car, the big Thunderbird, which was a classy car at that time. He had a cold look about him. He was an intense person. He wore glasses and was very intelligent, spoke good English, knew his way around. He was really respected in East LA in the drug culture. Reuben was a real relaxed, down-home type cat. Chubby. I don't think he even owned a suit. He wasn't intelligent as far as schooling went, but he was very smart in the ways of the streets, and he was smart in the ways of crime. Reuben was very open and warm and friendly, and we really got tight. He was always laughing and a lot of fun to be around. Reuben's father did landscaping. He had a gardening truck. So Reuben and I used to get together and go around just for kicks in this truck and do a couple of gardening jobs to get money to cop with. And while we were doing that, we would be boosting things, stealing. I'd never done anything like that until after I came out of jail. But then, little by little, each time I went to jail and came out, it got a little easier accepting that role. Frank and Reuben saw that I was really strung out again, so they asked me if I would be interested in making a little bread. Frank said, "There's a nightclub out in the valley I've been casing. We'd like to burglarize it. You're in if you'd like to do it." I said, "All right." I was broke by this time. I'd gone through just about everything and was already owing rent. I said, "Where's this place at?" Frank said, "That's one of the problems. It's right next to your house." The club he was referring to was one of these great big places on Ventura Boulevard, next door to where I was living. I realized that if I did this job, I'd probably have to move, but I said okay. I wanted to see if I had the nerve to do something like that. When I was in jail, I'd heard guys talk, and I wanted to see if I could do a righteous burglary like that with weapons. So I said, "All right."